Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your relationship without your man's conscious effort so that you feel desired and taken care of and special, even if your relationship feels completely hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today I'm sharing the 5 relationship hacks that all women should know, but most don't. My guest Shannon and her husband had been in love since high school, but they fought a lot, especially about parenting. They were both exhausted from the tension, but no counseling, classes, or retreats helped close the distance between them. Everything she tried didn't work. But today, her husband is so funny and fun again, and she feels taken care of. She's going to describe how she single-handedly brought the two of them close again. And then I'll be giving out the worst relationship advice of the week award, which made me gasp when I heard it. And you'll see exactly why when I tell you what it is. All of that's coming up. But first, let's talk about the 5 relationship hacks that all women should know, but don't. Let's start with this question. What do men want most from the women they love? Well, if you're asking yourself that, it's probably because your guy seems grumpy or distant or depressed, or maybe he's all 3. Early on in my marriage, when everything was a struggle, I thought I was a pretty good wife. And since my marriage was miserable, that meant that he was the problem. But now I realize I was looking at everything through my female eyes, which meant I didn't understand his perspective at all. Figuring out what my husband wanted and what made him feel loved blew open the whole mystery for me. Kind of like watching the end of the movie, The Usual Suspects, where you realize who the real killer is, and it wasn't who you thought. It was like traveling to another country and wondering why everyone was so hostile, and then learning that waving hello is their gesture for drop dead. Now that I know what makes men feel loved, my marriage is sweet and fun. It was easier than I thought. I was making it too hard until I discovered these simple habits. So here are 5 relationship hacks that I wish every woman knew, but most don't. These are the things that your man really wants and will inspire him to desire and cherish and adore you 10 times more. Number 1, respect him, which is probably not what you think. Women have a different view of respect than men do. Women tend to think they're being respectful when they're considerate. We think it's respectful to clean up so he won't have a mess left, or to reheat his dinner when he comes home late, or pick up his dry cleaning while we're out. Even as I say that, my female brain is thinking those things seem pretty respectful. But here's the rub. All of that completely misses the respect mark for men. Sure, it's nice to do those things, but it's not respect, which is like oxygen to men. And unless you know what respect looks like to a man, you can easily suffocate your husband or boyfriend without even realizing it. He'd rather you treat him with what he sees as respect, even if it meant you skipped all of those things. This is where the trouble starts, because if, while you're reheating his dinner, you contradict what he just said, or criticize him, or roll your eyes at him, or interrupt him, or second guess him, or try to teach him how to do something, or point out his mistake, he's likely to get defensive. That's because you were just disrespectful and you didn't even realize it. You have no idea because you didn't raise your voice or call him names. You're not trying to upset him. You were just being logical or helpful or practical. But in the process, you questioned his competence and he reacted badly, and you can't understand why. And that's likely to cause a big breakdown because here you are serving him dinner and he's barking at you or grunting or ignoring you. Seems very inconsiderate of him. Seems like he's not respecting you. So unless you know that even though he's a big, strong man, you just hurt him just as much as it would hurt you if he said, "You're not so easy to love." His irritation seems unwarranted. So being respectful means demonstrating that you have faith in his capabilities, appreciating his thinking, letting him know in actions as well as words that you think he's smart. He really is. You picked him to be with, and you wouldn't have picked an idiot. Number 2, receive graciously. Your man wants to know that he can make your life better, that he can contribute to your happiness. He doesn't really care if you ever do anything for him except respect his thinking and his competency, but he wants to be able to lighten your load and make you smile and make you laugh and protect you and give you the things that you want. He wants to be able to compliment you and know that you received it, even if it's that you look beautiful when you just clean the toilet. If you receive his extravagant gift that you could have lived without, or his offer to take you out to dinner even though you already defrosted the salmon, his compliments even though they make you a little uncomfortable, he'll be getting so much of what he wants from you, he'll be ridiculously happy. And with all his help, gifts, and compliments and special treatment, so will you. Such a deal, right? Number 3, be pleasable. Okay, so I made that word up, but I can't think of a better way to describe the quality that men want in a relationship. Since men are so driven to please their women, if he feels he can't succeed, he's going to start to feel useless and bad about himself. He needs someone to please. If he buys you a watch and you say that it's not the kind of watch you would wear, or if when he trims the trees and bushes, you say he trampled the begonias, or if you argue with him when he praises your lasagna, you're not pleasable. In other words, he can't make you happy, and he considers that his important job. The quickest solution is to seriously focus on making yourself happy. Do things that make it so you can't stop smiling. Consider the possibility that you would stop cleaning up the mess, reheating his dinner, and picking up his dry cleaning if that helps you free up time for frivolous fun. None of that stuff is as important to him as knowing that he pleased you, especially if that stuff is going to leave you frazzled. When you get happy, he feels proud and happy too. That's why that phrase, happy wife, happy life, is so universal. Number 4, show appreciation. Even if your husband or boyfriend seems like a gigantic disappointment right now, using this hack will be like getting a new husband or boyfriend. Let him know that you appreciate the way he gets the kids to behave at dinner, even if it's old news, or appreciate what a great job he does with the trash. Be grateful it's all taken care of and you don't have to worry about it. Let him know how happy you are that he made dinner, or moved the laundry to the dryer, or changed the diaper, or fixed the Wi-Fi, or changed the batteries in the remote. Even if he's done it for years and you've never expressed your gratitude and it's his job and you do way more than he does, your man wants to feel appreciated. And why not? If he didn't do all that stuff, you'd have to do it. Number 5, seduce him. Of course, your man wants sex too, unless he hasn't been feeling respected. Respect is the best aphrodisiac for men. So if it's gone missing completely, start with that one. You can't have passion without oxygen. Once he has oxygen, he'll be more lifelike in the bedroom. But even then, he doesn't want to feel pressured to perform at a particular time. He'd rather be teased or get some visual stimulation that might lead to feeling excited. You are visually stimulating, and your voice and your scent and your touch are stimulating too. And when you use those things to suggest that you're willing, that you're receptive, that's awfully attractive and exhilarating. It can also be scarier for you than just initiating things more directly with words or action. It's riskier for you to put on your skimpy outfit. I mean, he could just walk on by and you could feel rejected. But the upside is that you're issuing your invitation in the most feminine possible way with no pressure and lots of excitement. You're creating emotional safety by being open but not demanding. Another benefit of this approach is that you will never feel more desirable as when your man responds to your implied suggestion with enthusiasm and vigor. Just as with all the other relationship hacks, the beauty of the system is that when you use them, you not only feel better, he shows up like the man you fell in love with. The one you thought was smart, who couldn't do enough to make you happy and who loves to see you smile, and the one you appreciated and who turned you on. If you're wondering how to get started with fixing your relationship and making it shiny again, then you need a roadmap. Get 6 simple steps to follow that will set your relationship up for success. Discover 3 common mistakes that wives make trying to fix their relationship that just make things worse when you download my free Adored Wife Roadmap. You can do that at getcherished.com. Go to getcherished.com now to get your roadmap in minutes. My guest Shannon and her husband had been in love since high school, but they fought a lot, especially about parenting. And they were both exhausted from the tension, but no counseling, classes, or retreats helped close the distance between them. Everything she tried to fix their marriage didn't work. But today, her husband is so funny and fun again, and she feels taken care of. She's going to describe how she single-handedly brought the two of them close again. Shannon, thank you so much for being on the program. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So start by telling us what things were like in the bad old days in your marriage.
Yeah. So my husband and I found ourselves in the peak of our lives, the life that we had created together. We'd worked so hard. We had just had our 5th child. And my husband was managing a thriving real estate business. And I was homeschooling and had found myself as the founder and director of a thriving homeschool co-op. And so our plates were spinning really fast. And it seemed as though our dreams were coming true. However, it just felt like life was pulling us apart. We were so busy. He was working so much and he threw himself into his work. And I was throwing myself into my children and my homeschool world. And so it seemed as though the interactions between my husband and I, as the distance grew, it just became only conflict. Like there wasn't a lot of happiness and peace. So whenever we were with each other, there was tension, hostility, the resentment built between the two of us. And I didn't know what to do. I was lost. We had never found ourselves in this place before. So it was really disheartening.
And you were fighting about the parenting, it sounds like. Like what kinds of things, what kinds of conflict were you having?
Yeah. Then I didn't know. I couldn't understand what I was doing wrong or what was happening or why. It seemed as though we had always been on the same page as far as our family goals and our parenting goals, but with the birth of our 5th child, it was a lot. Like our home was just more chaotic than it had ever been. There was a lot more stress, more noise, more sibling conflicts. And I think it just stressed him out. It stressed me out. And I found myself trying to teach him how to parent. And he didn't like that. And so I didn't know I was doing that. I had no clue. I couldn't see it. But I think that was a lot of the source of our conflict in parenting. And, whatever I wanted, he wanted the opposite. It's just how it became. Like, it just, we couldn't agree.
So you felt like real adversaries.
Yeah.
Like your mothering was wrong, his fathering was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a moment when you said, okay, we can't go on like this anymore? This is not okay.
Yeah, there definitely was. As I said, most of the interactions between us at that point were just full of conflict, disagreements, arguing, cold wars. And I remember a moment in time when I knew we were in real trouble. And it was a Sunday morning and we were getting ready for church as we always did as a family. And I wanted to go to our small group after church that day. He didn't. And I didn't like his answer. I pushed, I nagged. I worked as hard as I could to get him to agree to go to small group because I wanted to see and fellowship with our friends that day. He didn't. And so he didn't like my nagging. He didn't like my pushing. And he showed me that through one of the biggest conflicts we had ever had. And he ended up taking the kids and going to church by himself. I was home alone in my closet crying with my tears keeping me company. And I knew I couldn't go on. I knew we were in trouble because we used to be this amazing kind, loving couple and family, and we just weren't that anymore. And I didn't know what happened.
Probably kind of worried about what your kids were seeing at that point also. Was that adding to the stress?
Absolutely. My kids became my top priority in trying to protect them from the arguing. And we had done a pretty good job of keeping our arguments behind closed doors at that point. But from that point on, we couldn't anymore. It was out in the open, and the kids knew, we knew, I knew that we were heading down the wrong path.
So how did you try to fix this?
Yeah, so I've always been the problem solver in our family. And so, of course, I went to work to solve this problem. And we turned to marriage counselors. We turned to inner healing counselors. We turned to classes at church, marriage retreats. We tried it all. And we may have had a few successes after each of those, but it never lasted. It was very short-lived. And the parenting struggles continued, the marriage struggles continued, the conflicts. And I was so hopeless. I was really hopeless.
Wow. So were you thinking, how were you thinking about the future at this point when nothing was working? What did you see for yourself?
Yeah, I found myself on the fence a lot, having to ask myself, is this going to be salvageable? Can our marriage return to the place of peace and happiness that it used to be? And I would stay there for a good week or two, trying to figure out, am I going to keep fighting for this, or is it time to throw the towel in? But every time I would come to the place of saying, I want my marriage, I want to fight for this. And I would just keep looking and keep searching for answers.
So it's enormous temptation, though, when you're feeling so much hurt every day and there's so much conflict. It's kind of normal in a way to get up on that fence and think, I got to get out of this somehow. But every time the answer kept coming back to you that you wanted to keep your marriage.
Absolutely. I loved him.
Yeah. So what did you do?
So after that conflict in that moment, I knew everything we were trying wasn't working. And by the grace of God, shortly after that, I came across an article that was written by you, Laura, and it hit me in the gut. I knew this is what I was searching for because it was skills. They were skills that I could use every day to try to slowly combat the conflict that was in my marriage. And so I got the books. I got both of your books, The Empowered Wife and The Surrendered Wife, and I read them both. I read them both at the same time. I couldn't get enough. I could not take in what I was learning fast enough. And so I knew this was the answer. I knew this is what I needed, but I knew I couldn't do this alone. My marriage struggles were just too insurmountable. They felt insurmountable at that time. And so I quickly signed up for coaching with a Laura Doyle certified coach. And that began the transformation in my marriage.
Wow. So what did you do differently than what you had been doing at that point?
Yeah, I began to take responsibility for my side of the street. I had no idea that I had a choice in how I responded to this conflict and how I responded to my husband's irritation of my words and actions. And so I think that's the first thing that I did is I realized that it was up to me and I had the power to begin to change things and bring the peace back into my home.
Now, that must have been kind of a surprise because you weren't feeling real empowered prior to this.
No.
So yeah, how did you come to that realization that you actually did have the power? Why did that start making sense?
Yeah, I think through my coaching, I had found myself in a pretty deep depression as I was entering into coaching, just felt so defeated. And so as I worked with her, she began to give me skills that empowered me. And the first skill that I used, because my goal was just to have peace. I just wanted peace. I just wanted the conflict to go away. And so I started using duct tape. And as I began to use duct tape, it was so hard. But I knew that I had to change. I knew I had to change. And so as I began to use duct tape, I started to see myself change. I started to see that I didn't have to disagree. I didn't have to speak up. I didn't have to defend myself. At first, it felt like I was dishonoring myself by not my opinion, by not standing up and saying, you can't treat me this way. But I realized that I was also treating him that way. And I needed to take responsibility for my words and my actions first.
Wow. So it sounds like you felt a little bit like a doormat at first, initially.
Yes.
But there was something on the other side of it that you valued.
Yeah. I mean, there were days when I was applying duct tape that I wondered if it was working, because it seemed as though the first few months of this skill, I received a whole lot of bait, a lot of bait. And it felt like things were getting worse. But I also began to apologize for being disrespectful, things from our past that I had said and done, things currently. And I was saying it a lot. As hard as it was to get out of my mouth at times, I said it because I was learning to clean up my side of the street. And I would even receive bait from that. And so as I received that bait from my apology, I learned to just say, I hear you, and let it go.
What did he say when you apologized for being disrespectful to bait you?
Some things that he would say is like for parenting, if I got in the middle of him, what I perceived as being too harsh with a child in his parenting, I would try to get in the middle of it and stop him from what seemed to me as putting him down or discouraging the child from, I remember an incident when he was teaching our son to golf, our 7-year-old son to golf, and he was getting frustrated with him. Well, I came in on the end of it, and I tried to jump in and say, well, he's trying. He's doing everything you're teaching to. Maybe you need to step up and actually show him how to hit the ball. And my husband didn't receive that well at all. He got in his car and zoomed off, and he was really upset. And that's when I knew I crossed the line. And so when I apologized to him for being disrespectful, for trying to teach him how to parent our child, his bait back to me was, I wish you hadn't said that. Basically just reinforcing to me that I was wrong, that I should feel more guilty for my behavior. And I used to take that on myself and feel more guilty. But at this point, I had learned that I recognized that I had been disrespectful to him and stepping in. I apologized for being disrespectful. I cleaned up my side of the street. Now my job was to just say, I hear you, and duct tape.
Love it. So you don't need to repeat the apology. You already delivered the message. There's no groveling here. No, no woe is me or self-pity or anything else. Just like, I hear you. And so how long did this go on that he baited you? How'd you ever get through that?
Yeah, I would say it was 2 or 3 months that I fought through that bait season. And then came a really interesting season. Then came a few months of what felt to me like silence. But a few months in, I realized there's no conflict. It's peaceful. Okay, what is this? Is this good? It feels good, but yet it feels awkward because there was this awkward silence between my husband and I. Like we almost didn't know what to say to each other anymore. And so I was a little concerned that maybe I had done something wrong. But through this community, through my coaching, through all that I was learning, I was reaffirmed that this is a process and this is a good thing. You're in a good place. Keep going. So I kept going.
Wow, I love it. So you had accomplished your goal in a way. It felt peaceful. But it sounds like your goal kind of changed at this point. Like just quiet and peaceful wasn't really enough. What did you want at that point?
Yeah, I wanted it all. I wanted to go close to him again. I wanted the intimacy more than we'd ever had before. That was my goal. The emotional connection and safety. So that was the next thing I was heading for. So I just kept going. I kept apologizing when I needed to. I kept using duct tape, and I kept saying, I hear you. A lot of I hear you. And eventually, I had gotten in the habit of sitting down by my husband for about 30 minutes every night in the evening as he was watching TV, and I wouldn't say anything. I would just sit there and I would just be present next to him. The old me would ask lots of questions, trying to get him to talk and open up. But I was just going for just being there and just being close to him. And one night, this is probably, I would say 6 months after I started duct tape. So it was a longer process than I'd hoped for, but we got there because he just started talking. I hadn't even said a word. I hadn't asked him anything. He started telling me about his work day, about the friends he had talked to that day, about his golf date with his friend. He just started sharing so many details with me, and I wanted to cry because I knew that we had gotten there. I knew that the emotional safety was there again, and he trusted me, and I had found the place of connection again with my husband.
Beautiful story. Congratulations to you. That's a lot of patience for 6 months. And would you explain duct tape just a little bit for somebody who's listening but doesn't know what is she using the duct tape for?
Yeah, I know. I didn't know it when I started these skills, but quickly learned that I had been pretty disrespectful and pretty controlling of my husband. And I didn't even know it. I just thought I was being a strong, goal-oriented woman working for the life that I wanted, the life that I wanted for us. But in turn, my husband never felt heard. He never felt like his opinions mattered, or that I trusted him to make decisions for our family, or that I saw the best in him and expected the best in him. And so my words to him over the years had been very critical. And that wasn't okay with me anymore. When I began to see that the damage that it had done to him, the first step for me was to learn to not be critical with my words, to be judgmental, to just accept him, the decisions he made for his life. And so duct tape helped me. It was like a visual for me, thinking about this big piece of duct tape over my mouth in the moments that I wanted so badly to tell him that what he was doing was wrong. Like he was making a wrong business decision with a partner he shouldn't be doing business with, or he was really being too harsh with our children when they didn't deserve that. And as I used duct tape, it reminded myself that my goal here was to show my husband my heart, which was deep inside that. I really did believe in him. I really did see him as my hero and the protector of our family. And it was amazing to have that visual for me in the hardest moments of bait. I had to have that visual. I wouldn't have made it through without it.
Wow. This moment where he opens up to you on the couch was validation of all your work, that he now felt safe and you were no longer that critical woman that he'd been experiencing prior to this. You had changed.
That's right. That's the evidence that I needed. That's all I needed.
It must have felt like $1 million in that moment.
Yes, absolutely. Because I had tried so many things in the past to try to create that emotional safety, and nothing had worked. It was that moment that I realized the change was in me all along. I didn't even know it.
So what is your relationship like now?
Yeah. My husband is amazing. He's always been such a funny guy, and it had gotten buried in the middle of all of this. And another way that I had learned to handle bait was through humor. And I realized it'd been a long time since we'd laughed together, a long time. And so as I began to use humor and just poking fun at the different things he would say to me, he would laugh back, and suddenly we were both laughing, and he began to joke more, and I began to laugh at his jokes more. And so there's just a lot of laughter. There's a lot of peace. Just recently, he swept me away to a steak dinner that he had planned all on his own. And this was the same week that he had gone and picked up our groceries, brought them home, put them away, and had dinner ready for me when I got home that night. So it's so amazing, just the safety and the peace that we have in our home between my husband and I, but also just in our home with our children as well. It's just amazing.
So that sounds like a hot date. You took you to steak dinner. Like that sounds pretty romantic too.
Absolutely. And I gave him so many thank yous for that. Like I went over the top because it was so wonderful. And he's so creative. Like he took me to a place I never would have planned and thought for myself. And so when he's in charge, it's just, it's amazing what he can, the atmosphere that he can create in our marriage, that I just let him,
Love it. So for a woman who's listening and she's where you were, where he's too harsh with the kids and she feels like he's like her opponent. He's just trying to like maybe undermine what she's doing. They don't see eye to eye. And there's just a ton of conflict and like high drama moments. Where should she start?
I feel like it was such a process of using several of these skills all at once. But duct tape was definitely the first place for me to start, and to start with cleaning up my side of the street. Because until I took responsibility for how I was treating him, things weren't going to change. And so that's where I started. The other thing is there was so much conflict for so long in our marriage that I was living in needless emotional turmoil all the time. And for years, I didn't know how to handle that. I would isolate myself. I would cancel plans until it ran its course. But the other thing that I learned through this process that I do feel like helped change this for me in having the ability to use duct tape was when the net was happening, I would dive into self-care. I would go make myself happy. Instead of waiting for it to play its course or isolating myself, I would dive in to making myself happy. And as I did that, I saw that I became a magnet. My husband was attracted to that. And so those are really the things that got me through that initial turning point to get to the place where the breakthroughs came, was managing the net through self-care, as well as duct tape and keeping my side of the street clean through making sure I apologize if I were disrespectful to him.
Wow, I love that. What do you think you'd say to Shannon from before if you could go back and tell her what you know now?
I would tell her to trust your husband. Trust that you don't have to be in control all the time, that he is a good father. He parents our children well. He doesn't think the way that I do, but that's okay, because it requires both of us, both of our ways of parenting. And just to have fun, just to enjoy the process and not have such high expectations of him, of me, of our life, but to laugh and enjoy my husband because he is a blessing. And I lost sight of that. I lost sight of that at some point through my disrespect and control. And I would definitely go back and just laugh a whole lot more.
Love that. And so, do you feel like he still baits you like these, do arguments still come up from time to time?
Yes, I am definitely still growing. I'm still learning. And I realized about myself recently that when things in my life are a little bit out of control, which happens, we have 5 kids, we're juggling a lot. Life just happens, especially we know with COVID, and we just recently had an ice storm here, and we've been without power in our community for almost a week now. We have power, but it's been stressful. My son had emergency surgery on his hand in the middle of that. It's been very stressful. So what I'm realizing is when life gets stressful and feels out of control, that controlling nature in me comes back out. And I fight that. I get on everyone else's page again. And so what I'm learning right now is I am such a mirror to my husband and to my children. And when I am controlling and on his paper, that's what's reflected back to me. And so there is some bait, that occurs when I'm not using these skills and I'm not on my paper. So it's very, very rare now, very rare that the bait happens. And I can see it quickly. I can recover quickly. And I know what to do when I've gotten off track with these skills. So it's still a growing process, but man, have we come so far. And I'm so thankful to have these skills because it is life for our family.
Wow. And it was a big deal. I mean, there's 7 people's lives you have transformed by really choosing this discipline of deciding not to share your critical thoughts and deciding to apologize when you weren't so perfect, as none of us are, right? I still apologize for being disrespectful. So, how has it affected your kids, would you say?
They're so happy. They're so happy and peaceful and more respectful with each other. And we just all have so much fun together. Like, they love being with us, with my husband and I. We love being together as a family. They love being with us, even our teenagers,
Oh,
which is amazing, that they still love to be home. And they're picking up these skills little by little, as long as I continue to be the mirror. And it's just been wonderful.
your teens turned driving age recently, I heard.
Yeah, they recently received their cars. They don't have their license yet, but it's
Okay.
coming up in about 2 weeks. They'll be off and driving.
And this is a kind of a nice story too, right? Because your husband did some planning around that.
Yeah, he did. It was amazing. Before, I wouldn't have received it as well, but he uh, got in tune with our kids and what they wanted for their cars, and worked with them and found the cars, and he went and bought them. And he has spoiled them. And, before, I would have probably been frustrated, like, why am I not a part of this process? Like, I'm being left out. And I was included a little bit by bit, but I wasn't in control. And that's new for me, to just receive um, what he feels is best. And so he bought the cars, he arranged the surprise presentation to them. And I got to just go along and buy the bows for the cars and video and enjoy the moment. It was just so beautiful and so wonderful, a memory I'll hold forever.
Wow, beautiful. Well, Shannon, congratulations on transforming this marriage to where you felt hopeless and on the fence to one where you're enjoying these magical moments as a family and being whisked off to steak dinner as a couple. It's just, I admire you so much for all that you've done.
Thank you so much. It's just been a wonderful blessing to our family and transformation. And I'm just looking forward to continuing to grow.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing all the details of your inspiring story.
Thank you.
If you're wondering how to get started with fixing your relationship and making it shiny again, then you need a roadmap. Get 6 simple steps to follow that will set your relationship up for success. Discover 3 common mistakes that wives make trying to fix their relationship that just make things worse when you download my free Adored Wife Roadmap. You can do that at getcherished.com. Go to getcherished.com now to get your roadmap in minutes. And now it's time for the Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award.
It's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice. Yeah, it's the worst relationship advice of the worst relationship advice of the week.
And the advice that's horrifying me this week is from a coach from some other place, not from our campus, who told her client, have a bag packed and in the car in case you need to get out. Ooh. I heard about this advice by way of Coach Julie here at Laura Doyle Connect, one of our own. She's one of the coaches who talks to women who are considering private coaching to explore what's possible for them in their relationships. And she writes, I hear a lot about other coaching programs out there that focus on marriage. Today, a discovery call client said that she has had to hide past programs from her husband, that he never felt safe. She said that the last coach that she had advised her to have a bag packed and in the car if she needed to get out. The coach texted this to the client. The husband read this text on his wife's phone. Ooh. I had never felt so grateful to be on this campus with this brilliant methodology that trusts the client to be the expert in her own life, says Coach Julie. And this story, just breaks my heart because, can you imagine how defensive that must have made the poor husband? He's just a mere mortal man. And the subtext of the text message was, he sounds dangerous and scary and he may try to hurt you physically. Wouldn't it be terrifying to know that your spouse is getting support from someone who has that point of view about you? On our campus, we call this a spouse-fulfilling prophecy. And it's funny how when you focus on expecting the best, that's what you get. And when you focus on expecting the worst, like this pinhead coach did, you get the worst. The worst. But even if the husband had never seen this text, and let's say it had been sent privately from that lousy coach to her client, it's just terrible coaching. This woman was seeking support for her marriage, not someone to amplify her fears and accelerate the drama. That is not my idea of standing for her greatness or for the greatness of the man she chose. Imagine if you hired a tennis coach and the coach was like, you should quit this sport now because you're never going to be any good. You might say, but what if this woman really wasn't safe in her relationship? What if there was physical abuse or mental abuse or something else happening that threatened her safety? Of course, safety always comes first. If you're not safe, then you have to get safe. But a coach's job is to help you find your faith, to focus on what's going right, because there's only fear and love. And when you're choosing fear, you're creating that negative outcome you're dreading. And when you choose love, that's where you create miracles. And it's impossible not to experience what you're focused on, what you're choosing to focus on. I'm going to say that again because that really just still blows me away sometimes. It's impossible not to experience what you're focused on. Hope is fragile, and other people can influence it greatly. And this woman had hope for her marriage, or she never would have hired a coach. The coach's job is to hold that hope in safe hands and fan the flames of that hope until it's a roaring fire. Instead, the awful, terrible, very bad coach brought in a super strength hope extinguisher. And that breaks my heart because I remember how awful and sad it felt when I believed experts who told me that my marriage was hopeless. I still get so mad because that was a big lie. They were so wrong. I just needed some training to get the marriage I have now, where I feel so loved every day by a man I admire so much. For that reason, the advice to have a bag packed and in the car if you need to get out is the very worst relationship advice I've heard all week. Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. Next week, we'll be talking about how to get your husband to want a baby. In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that my friend bought me a beautiful gold veneer calculator, and it's perfect for doing girl math.